Yuna dragged the last box over the threshold and leaned back against the closed door. The apartment smelled of fresh plaster and someone else's life. The previous tenants had left a faint trace of a large framed photograph on the wall in the hallway, a rectangle slightly lighter than the rest of the wall, and for some reason Yuna stared at it for a long time, as if trying to guess what exactly was hanging in that place. A family portrait? A wedding photo? Maybe it's just an IKEA poster. She was 26. Her first apartment of her own is not rented, not parental, not temporarily on a friend's couch, but her own, bought with a mortgage, which she will pay for the next 20 years. A small one-room apartment on the 7th floor of a prefabricated house in a residential area where all the courtyards are similar to each other, and from the window you can see an endless row of similar prefabricated houses. But Yuna loved this apartment the way one loves the first puppy, blindly, illogically, with all her heart. For the first 3 days she took things apart, washed windows, selected curtains in an online store, and every evening took out the trash, cardboard from boxes, film, and remnants of packaging. The container yard was located right at the entrance behind a low brick fence, and each entrance was supposed to have 2 containers. Yunin's entrance was the 3rd, and the containers were the 6th and 7th. She remembered it right away because she loved order. Order was her way of controlling a world that too often spiraled out of control. On the 4th day after moving in, she took out a bag of trash, opened the lid of the 7th container, and found that it was packed to capacity. Which was strange in itself. She had been taking out the trash the night before, and the container was half empty. Yuna shrugged and dropped the bag into the 6th. The next morning, history repeated itself. The 7th container was overflowing. The bags were packed so tightly that the lid would not close. Yuna noticed that the bags were identical. Large, black, made of thick polyethylene. Not the standard transparent or blue supermarket bags that most residents used. These looked like they were bought in bulk, on purpose. Someone, Yuna thought, is generating an incredible amount of garbage. She would have forgotten about it if it weren't for one thing. On Monday morning, going to work, Yuna ran into the manager of the house on the landing, a plump woman named Tamara Pavlovna, who behaved as if the house belonged to her personally. Tamara Pavlovna stopped Yuna, gave her an appraising look, and informed her that complaints were coming from the 3rd entrance. Containers were constantly overflowing, garbage was spilling onto the playground, and rats. The residents wrote a collective letter. Tamara Pavlovna looked at Yuna as if Yuna was personally to blame for these rats. Yuna said nothing. She didn't know yet that silence was the worst strategy in the war, which she hadn't realized yet. The first week of November, Yuna lived a normal life. In the morning, she went to work at an architectural bureau in the city center, where she drew facades of buildings that might never be built. In the evening, go home, have a semi, finished dinner, watch a TV series on a laptop, trash in a container, sleep. But every time she approached the container site, the 7th container was filled with black bags. Yuna began to observe. It wasn't that she was specifically watching, but she began to pay attention to the time. She noticed a pattern. The packages appeared late at night, between 11 and midnight. She knew this because one day she looked out the kitchen window at exactly 11, and the container was half empty. And in the morning, when she went to work at 8, the lid wouldn't close again. Someone clogged her container at night. In the 2nd week of observations, Yuna was lucky. She returned home later than usual. She stayed at the bureau, then went to the grocery store, and approached the entrance around 11:30. The yard lamp provided enough light to make out the figure at the container site. It was a woman. She was tall, slender, and wore a long dark coat. She stood at the 7th container and methodically stuffed large black bags into it. 1, 2, 3. Yuna stopped and watched. The woman finished, dusted off her hands, not even hands, but gloves, black leather gloves, and turned around. Yuna recognized her. More precisely, she had seen this woman before, but did not know her name. The neighbor from the apartment opposite is 84th. Yuna lived in 83rd. They crossed paths in the elevator twice. The first time the woman glanced at Yuna with an indifferent gaze. The second time she didn't even look up from her phone. Now, in the dim light of the lantern, the woman noticed Yuna, froze for a second, and then, as if nothing had happened, went to the entrance. Yuna stood on the sidewalk with a supermarket bag in her hand and watched her neighbor dial the intercom code. Their eyes met for a moment, and Yuna saw something strange in her neighbor's eyes. No shame, no embarrassment, more like a challenge. The entrance door closed. Yuna spent the evening thinking about it. She was lying on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and running through the options in her head. Maybe the neighbor really has too much garbage. Maybe she's doing repairs. Maybe she has a big family. But Yuna had never seen anyone leave 84th except this woman. No husband, no children, no relatives. Only she was tall, with brown hair, always in black, always with that expression on her face that said, "Don't touch me, I'm taller than that." The next morning, Yuna decided to act. Not aggressively, no, she didn't like conflict. She wrote a neat note on an A4 sheet. "Dear neighbor from Square 84, please use the containers of your entrance. Containers number 6 and number 7 belong to entrance number 3 and are designed for a certain number of residents. Thank you for understanding." Yuna put the note in an envelope, signed it Square 84, and carefully inserted it into the crack between the door and the jamb. In the evening, after cleaning up, she found an envelope on the mat at her own door. The note was inside, unanswered, unmarked. It was just returned as a parcel with an incorrect address. Yuna stood in the hallway, holding her note with 2 fingers, and felt something shrink inside her. She hated that feeling. She recognized him. It was like this at school, when high school students took her place in the cafeteria. It was like this at university, when a teacher underestimated grades because she was too quiet. It was like this at a previous job, when the boss attributed her projects to himself. Someone decided for her what she would put up with, and usually, they were right. But not this time. Yuna bought an apartment, 20 years of mortgage. This was her territory. She waited 3 more days. Every morning there is an overflowing container. Black bags every morning. On the 4th day, Yuna left the apartment at 11 in the evening and ran into her neighbor right at the elevator. The woman was carrying 2 huge black bags and didn't even try to hide where she was going. Yuna took a deep breath and addressed her. She spoke calmly, politely, as only people who have been practicing phrases in front of a mirror for a long time can speak. She explained the situation. Containers are overflowing, residents are complaining, the manager has already paid attention. She asked, not demanded, to use the containers attached to the 4th entrance. The neighbor listened in silence. Then she spoke for the first time. Her voice turned out to be low, velvety, with a slight hoarseness, the kind of voice used by femme fatales in dramas who turn out to be the main villains. "Mine are overflowing too fast," she said. Just as a fact, like it's Wednesday or it's raining outside. And she left, with 2 bags, to container number 7. Yuna stood by the elevator and listened to the sound of the departing cabin. Something clicked inside her, that little switch that separates patience from determination. The plan was not born immediately. Yuna thought for 2 days. She considered options. Write a complaint to the management company, put a camera at the containers, contact the district police officer. It all seemed too long, too bureaucratic, too much powerless. Yuna wanted something else. Not revenge? No, she told herself it wasn't revenge. She wanted justice. I wanted my neighbor to understand. Actions have consequences. On Wednesday evening, Yuna put on rubber gloves, yellow household ones, bought at fixed price, took a flashlight and went out to the containers at 11:30. Fresh black bags lay on top, 3 of them heavy, tightly tied. Yuna pulled them out and carried them to the bench at the entrance. She did it methodically, like an architect accustomed to precision. She opened the first package. Inside there is food waste, packages from ready meals, empty bottles of mineral water. Nothing unusual. The second package is paper, lots of paper. Some kind of printouts, advertising booklets, receipts. And the receipts. Long cash receipts that had the date, time, and, Yuna held her breath, the loyalty card number printed on them. The third package turned out to be the most interesting. Yuna found empty medicine boxes among the trash. A lot of boxes, a dozen, maybe more. Each box had a pharmacy sticker with the buyer's name, Serebriakova V.D. Yuna carefully photographed the stickers on her phone. Then she photographed the receipts. Then, to be safe, I shot a short video showing the packages, their contents, and container number 7 in the background. The evidence has been collected. But Yuna didn't stop. She put all the trash back in the bags, carefully without spilling anything, and carried them to the entrance. The elevator took her to the 7th floor. The playground was empty and quiet. There was no sound outside the door of the 84th apartment, no light in the peephole. Yuna placed the first bag at the neighbor's door. The second one is nearby. The third one is slightly ahead, so that the door cannot be opened completely without hitting him. Then she went downstairs and brought back 2 more packages that had been in the container since the last time. She recognized them by their characteristic knots. She placed these packages in a semicircle, creating a kind of barricade. It wasn't high, but it was high enough for a neighbor to open the door in the morning and find herself face to face with her own trash. Yuna took a step back and looked at her work. 5 black bags stood at the door of the 84th apartment, like a silent reproach. Yuna took a picture of it too, just in case, and went to her room. She closed the door, took off her gloves, and washed her hands 3 times, with soap, then with antiseptic, then with soap again. I sat down in the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and waited. Her heart was pounding like she'd robbed a bank. The morning came at 6:30. That's when Yunin's alarm clock made its first trill. She woke up instantly, as if she hadn't been asleep. I lay in bed listening. There is silence behind the wall. There is silence on the playground. Yuna got up, dressed, and put on makeup, a familiar morning ritual that helped her feel in control. She had breakfast, packed her bag for work, and went to the front door. She pressed her ear to the cold metal. Nothing. She looked through the peephole. The playground was empty. Her side of the playground, at least. The neighbor's door was not visible through the peephole. The angle did not allow. Yuna opened the door and went out. The packages were still there, all 5 of them, untouched. The neighbor hasn't come out yet. Yuna felt a strange mixture of triumph and anxiety. She pressed the elevator button and waited, trying not to look at the black bags. The elevator arrived. Yuna went inside. The second the doors started to close, she heard the lock click. The door of apartment 84 opened. The elevator doors closed. Yuna drove down and counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. At the count of 8, a scream came from above. Not a scream, but a scream. High-pitched, full of rage. Then a crash. Then silence. Then there was another scream, but not a scream anymore, but a stream of words that Yuna couldn't make out through the elevator shaft, but the intonation left no doubt. A neighbor found a barricade. Yuna came out of the entrance into the cold November air, and a smile appeared on her face for the first time in a long time. Not gloating, but rather satisfied. Like an architect who sees that the building was built exactly according to his drawings. Yuna was distracted at work all day. She drew the facade of the apartment complex, but the lines were uneven, the proportions were floating. Dima's colleague, who was sitting at the next table, asked if everything was okay. Yuna nodded and smiled, but her stomach was clenching with anticipation. She didn't know what was waiting for her at home. Maybe the neighbor put away the packages and drew conclusions. Maybe she called the police. Maybe she wrote a complaint to the management company. Maybe she would ambush Yuna on the playground with a kitchen knife. Yuna immediately dismissed the thought, but it returned like an annoying fly and buzzed in her head until the evening. At 6 o'clock, Yuna left the office. She usually got home in 40 minutes, by subway, then by bus, then on foot across the courtyard. Today, the road seemed endless to her. She was sitting in a subway car, sandwiched between a man in a down jacket and a woman with a wheelchair, and replaying scenarios in her head. One is worse than the other. She arrived at the entrance at 7. She dialed the intercom code. I got into the elevator. She pressed the button for the 7th floor. I rode up and felt my pulse quicken with each floor. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. The doors opened. The playground was clean. There were no packages. Not a single one. The floor in front of the door of the 84th apartment was shiny. It had obviously been washed. Yuna smelled bleach, faint but distinct. She inserted the key into the lock of her door and noticed something else. There was an envelope on her doormat, white, without a signature. Yuna picked it up, went into the apartment, locked the door with both locks, for the first time since moving in, and opened the envelope. There was a piece of paper inside. There is a printed text on it. No appeal, no signature. Only 3 lines. You've made a big mistake. You've been rummaging through other people's things. You will regret it. Yuna read it 3 times. My hands weren't shaking. Yet. She put the paper on the kitchen table, poured herself a glass of water and gulped it down. Then she sat on a stool and stared out the window at the dark November evening. Threat. A real, written, unequivocal threat. Yuna took out her phone and opened the gallery. Photos of receipts. Photos of pharmacy stickers. Video of the container. Photo of the barricade. Everything was in place. She sent the files to her email address, uploaded them to the cloud, and dropped them onto a USB flash drive, which she put in the drawer of the bedside table. 3 copies, the minimum. Then she photographed the letter. 4 copies. Yuna wasn't going to be sorry. The next 3 days were strangely quiet. The neighbor did not show up. Yuna did not hear any footsteps behind the wall, nor the slamming of the door, nor the sound of the elevator on their floor. Container number 7 was half empty, as normal as it should be. The black bags were gone. Yuna checked the container every evening like a surgeon checking a patient's pulse after surgery. On the 4th day, Yuna returned from work and saw that the door of the 84th apartment was ajar, not wide open, by the palm of your hand, maybe a little more. A strip of warm light fell from the crack. Yuna walked past, trying not to look. She went into her room, closed the door, and leaned back against it. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Yuna went to the peephole. A neighbor was standing on the landing, without a coat, in his home clothes, a dark sweater, jeans. Her hair is pulled back in a ponytail. Without makeup, she looked younger and, Yuna was surprised at her own thought, tired. Very tired. Yuna opened the door, but not completely, by the width of the chain. The neighbor was silent. She looked at Yuna, and there was no challenge or aggression in that look. There was something else, something that Yuna didn't immediately recognize. Then the woman spoke, quietly, almost in a whisper. She said her name was Vera, that she lives alone, that she didn't want to threaten. She was scared. That receipts and medications are personal, that medications are for panic attacks and depression, that she doesn't want anyone to know, that there's really a lot of trash because she orders food at home every day, sometimes twice, because she can't bring herself to cook, that the packages from the delivery take up the entire container, that she knows what she did was wrong, that she was ashamed. Vera spoke and her voice trembled, and Yuna stood on the other side of the chain and felt something inside her, that rigid, determined structure that she had built in recent days, begin to crack. Yuna took off the chain. They were sitting in Yuna's kitchen, facing each other with cups of tea, which was getting cold and which neither of them drank. Vera was looking into her cup. Yuna looked at Vera. The story that the neighbor told was one of those that did not fit into 15 minutes of reading, but Yuna remembered the main thing. Vera moved into this apartment 6 months ago after the divorce. Her husband left her the apartment because he felt guilty. Vera did not specify the details, and Yuna did not ask. Vera hardly left the house for the first few months. She worked remotely, as a translator, a freelancer, and the days merged into one endless gray ribbon. Food from the delivery, medicines, the garbage that was accumulating faster than she could take it out. The containers of the fourth entrance, her entrance, were further away, around the corner of the house, and the way to them seemed like an expedition to her. The containers of the third entrance, the union, were right at the entrance, closer, easier. Vera knew she was doing the wrong thing, but in those moments when anxiety squeezed her chest and the world shrank to the size of her apartment, right and wrong lost their meaning. There was only maybe and impossible. Yuna listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't nod sympathetically, didn't say, "I understand," because she wasn't sure she understood. She had never suffered from panic attacks. She has never been divorced. She never ordered food at home twice a day because she couldn't bring herself to enter the kitchen. But she knew what it was like to feel like the world was too big and you were too small. When Vera fell silent, Yuna was silent too. Long. It was snowing outside, the first one this year. Large flakes fell slowly, lazily, as if they were in no hurry to reach the ground. Then Yuna got up, took a flash drive with photos out of the drawer, and put it on the table in front of Vera. "It's all here," she said. "Photos, videos, take it." Vera looked at the flash drive as if it were a grenade. "I'll delete the rest of the copies," Yuna added, "but the garbage is in its container." Vera nodded, quickly, several times, as if she was afraid that if she stopped, she would change her mind. A month has passed. Container number 7 was no longer overflowing. The black bags were gone, at least from the containers in the third entrance. Tamara Pavlovna reported at the meeting that the complaints had stopped and the rats had left, although Yuna suspected that there had never been any rats, and Tamara Pavlovna simply liked to dramatize. They didn't become friends with Vera, not in the sense that they are friends in dramas, with dinners together and intimate conversations. But something has changed. They greeted each other on the landing briefly with a nod. Vera sometimes left small gifts at Yuna's door, a bag of good tea, a tangerine, and an unsigned postcard. Yuna received them in silence. One day, in December, Yuna saw Vera in the yard. She was walking to the containers of the fourth entrance, to her containers, with 2 black bags. She walked slowly, hesitantly, like a person learning to walk again. She was wearing that dark coat and black leather gloves. Yuna was looking out of the kitchen window. Vera reached the containers, opened the lid, and dropped the bags. She stood for a second. Then she turned around as if she felt the gaze and looked up at the windows on the 7th floor. Yuna did not step back from the window. She raised her hand and waved, just the way you wave to your neighbors, the way you wave to people you see every day and get used to without noticing. Vera stood there for another second. Then she raised her hand and waved back. It was snowing again. Big, slow, lazy. Yuna turned away from the window, finished her tea, and went to work on a drawing for a new building, a residential complex with a beautiful facade that might someday be built. There was an unsigned postcard on the kitchen table. It had a picture of a trash can with flowers inside. Yuna smiled. She bought an apartment to finally live alone. It turned out that being alone does not mean without people. One means with a choice of who to let in. Sometimes we let people in through the door, sometimes through a dumpster.